If your bike has a Fox Float X or DHX Performance Series shock, then you know that you don't have a low-speed compression adjustment knob, but you probably wish you did. However, with this $25 baggie of parts from Fox, you can add a low-speed compression adjustment knob to your Performance Series shock and essentially upgrade it to a Performance Series Elite. And that's all the same adjustments as the factory series. These shocks come spec'd on tons of affordably priced bikes from brands like Specialized, Transition, Trek, Santa Cruz, and pretty much every brand with a budget-minded build in their lineup. This isn't exactly labeled as an upgrade kit per se, it's actually labeled as an eyelet subassembly, so it's kind of in the hack category, which makes it automatically more fun. While this is a popular little hack on forums right now, we've confirmed that this works 100% to add a low-speed compression adjustment to your Fox Float X or DHX Performance shock. However, we're making this video because it's actually pretty tricky to install. Installation will take some patience and steady hands to install correctly, and isn't quite as easy as just screwing on a knob like it may seem. But it's still a cheap, fun, effective upgrade that you should know about. Well, that's enough talking about little knobs. We're gonna have our suspension wizard Alex come over here, and they're gonna show us how to install it. Alex will be installing the knob onto a Float X Performance Series air shock from a Specialized Stumpjumper Evo Comp alloy, but this will be the same process on the Float X and DHX Performance Series shocks from any other bikes.
What's up? I'm Alex, and let's unlock some new adjustments for your shock. You can get these parts at thelostco.com. We're one of the only places that has a hold of these things right now, so for only 25 bucks, bring your thing up to a Performance Elite level. Please watch this video all the way through before trying to install, just to get a familiar look at all of the bits and bobs on the inside, and just to get a handle on the technique before you try to do it following along. All right, so just some more notes before we get started, just to keep in mind on everything. I like to do this all sitting down in a nice level desk height workspace because it is pretty tedious and you don't want to be standing or unstable. You could mount your shock in a vise. I find it's easier just to kind of hold it all by hand, and just spatially it's a little easier. The first few things we want to make sure before you even open the baggie is that you just make a nice clean work surface for yourself. I use this little microfiber towel here because the little balls and springs are tiny and delicate and they want to bounce around on whatever you're doing. So this helps to kind of just catch everything and be a nice little surface for you to do the stuff on. So first things first is to make sure all the parts are in the bottom of the baggie because you don't want to lose any pieces. You know, there is one of the ball bearings in here that can be reused from the old setup, but generally, obviously you'll want to have it all. So let's just carefully get going. And you can just very neatly open it all up. The little parts like to fit all together in the baggie, so make sure you shake out all these little shoulders here. Make sure there's no balls hiding inside. And then the next thing is to separate the springs because those also get caught together. So you should have 4 springs and 5 balls, and then 4 of these caps. There are 4 balls that are the same size and 1 that is a little bit smaller. So we just want to identify all those, get the smaller one out of the way so we don't mix it up. We can kind of see how things generally are going to look. It looks pretty complex. If you've ever worked on fork adjusters or shock adjusters before, they're usually pretty simple, but this one's kind of funky, so we got to have a little special care to it. So the first thing we need to do is take off the old, essentially just the plastic boot. It's not really doing anything except holding the place of all this stuff. So you don't have to destroy the cap, but it may happen just because you have to pry it off. Oh, another little disclaimer. I've only done this once. We've only had one shock that we've come across since we found this out recently. So we did it on my personal shock, but this will be the second one that we're doing. Yeah, still tuning in the process, so bear with me. It's gonna be a little bit of a remembering from the first one and also just trying to dial in the techniques because it's tricky, so.
It's actually probably better that this is your second time versus your 30th time with people that are doing it their first time at home.
Yes, that's a good point.
So this is a more relatable experience
Yes.
because you do suspension stuff all day. So it's actually better that you don't have it dialed yet.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point. Yes, because it'll be a good learning process. So yeah, let's just start to kind of push this thing off. It is gripped on pretty tight, so you can't just expect it to come off right away. So we'll do a little prying on that side, a couple little pushes. Obviously, whatever you're using, whether it's a flathead or a small Allen or something, you just want to make sure you don't dig it in too deep to scratch the body of the shock. And it may happen just very slightly, so don't feel too bad because it's not really a super, there we go, super delicate part of the shock, but it can be. So we'll kind of do a little pry and then just do that.
Hey, nice.
Which that may actually be the best way. Maybe don't pry first. Maybe just try and grab it with some pliers because that seemed to be a pretty good way. Okay, one thing I didn't think of when I pulled it off is there is a little ball that's hiding right in the top. You know, just basically make sure you have that. And usually it'll stick in there. They pack it with grease when they make it from the factory. So, you know, we didn't really have an issue. I took my other one out thinking that we weren't gonna need it, but then upon the install learned how it worked and realized that we do need it. Then found that the kit comes with one, so we were all safe. But just don't lose one anyways, obviously. Why would you if you don't have to? So next, let's just do a little cleanup around here. If your shock has a good amount of time on it, it's gonna collect a little dirt in here. If it's new, you should be pretty good, but this is a sealed and isolated area, or I guess not sealed, but it's an area that's just external for the shock. You know, all this doesn't connect to the inner part, so you don't have to do a rebuild. You can do all this externally. So what we're actually going to do is use grease that's not for inside the shock. So this is stuff that's just like standard high temperature grease. The reason we use this is because the shock damper gets hot as you use it. Obviously, if you were to use a slick oleum, slick honey type of grease, that stuff breaks down and gets really thin when it gets hot, which is good for inside the suspension, but not good for outside, because that would just seep down and it would be gone within the first few rides. And it would probably collect a lot of dirt and make things gritty and gross. So we use like standard high temp grease to work with all the adjusters. All right, so I have some of this EPX grease preloaded in a little container for suspension use anyway, so that's how I'm gonna scoop it out, but that's what we're using. So now we'll just kind of get everything staged and prepped for install. We want to do little tiny dabs of grease on all the interfaces. Only some of this will actually grease the moving parts, but a lot of it will just be grease to help the install because everything needs to stick together so that nothing falls apart when you're trying to put it together. So I use this little 2mm Allen for grease a lot of the time with certain suspension things, just as an applicator. These little rounded heads on them get worn out so fast that they end up becoming fairly soft. So now before we place any of them into the shock body itself, we'll take a little swab of that grease, just enough to dab on each of the holes so that all those adjusters will sit in there and not fall out. So essentially with the kit you have 4 sets of these 3 pieces. So now let's show you how to put them together. We'll basically get a little dab of grease on your applicator here. Use it to pick it up because everything's so small. Swipe some in there, use that to grab your spring. Drop that in there, a little dab of grease, little ball, sits right there as well. And then before you put it all down, because it's really tedious, just go ahead and slide it in. And we'll do that with all 4 of them. Take that, and we'll just drop one in. It's not super unsafe to just put them all in. They can't really go too far. Luckily, this setup is kind of built so that the balls can't fall completely out of their seat and into the cavity there, so you can just kind of put them in. Obviously, don't go crazy, but they're pretty safe.
So you'll start with these 4 hollow holes on top of the reservoir, and then once you assemble all little bits, You're just gonna fill all of those up.
All right, so now we've got all the adjusty bits all seated in their places. So now we'll do a simultaneous action here. For each one of them, we're gonna, basically just push on it with your finger on the backside and use a little pick to push on the ball just to make sure that they're fully seated, because we need everything to give us the most room. We essentially need the most room on the inside between the balls and the adjuster, and then the most room on the outside, with this being as flush as possible to install the actual knob onto the unit. So you kind of go around in a little circle here, seating everything.
So you're just trying to get the ball bearing level with like the inside lip?
Not quite level with the inside, but pretty close. And it's kind of a balancing act of making sure everything's pushed out, but also making sure it's pushed in. And if you've ever rebuilt a fairly complex free hub body, with the pawls and springs, this is pretty similar, just in a different way. But it's a pretty similar concept where you're trying to simultaneously push things around in a circle, but also get them to move. And then I also did a little bit of grease on the dimples on the outside edge of that inner shaft on the adjuster knob, just to get everything grease happy so it'll last forever, because it's not a fully permanent install, but it's probably near impossible to take off. There are little pinprick holes, 4 of them corresponding to the 4 pieces to remove, but I don't know what is out there to possibly do that. So this is kind of like a set it and it's just gonna be how it is. You're gonna have an upgraded shock for life. I don't know how it's gonna come off. So,
as they say on the East Coast, forget about it.
So, first thing to do is to get all those 4 seated, and then just very slightly push some room around the adjuster, because that's the first thing that makes contact with the new knob that we're putting on. So we need to make room around those balls for this to even go on. So we're going to just lightly set it on there so you can feel that's clocked onto the teardrop. So once that's on, don't force it anymore, because it won't just snap into place. You have to then depress all 4 of these outer cylinder retainers in to allow that cap to seat. So this is where it gets a little tricky, but basically you're just going to want to apply a light amount of pressure to the top of it and kind of bias that pressure towards one of the pegs, and then we're going to just push till it lips over just like that, and it holds it into place. Then, whoop, that's how easy it is to let it go. So I'm gonna start back and do that again. Okay, got the one. Oh my God.
You need 4 friends to come over with little picks.
You do. You need everyone to join forces here.
Ask your neighbor for some sugar and also to hold your bearing retainer.
Can I borrow your hands? Okay, so start that again. Do the 1. Don't release pressure, because now you can actually, if you lighten up your pressure at all on your finger, it snaps right off. So you actually kind of increase the force a little bit. So it's pretty darn tight. So then we'll go to the second one. Kind of do 2 at once. It's just going back and forth. Okay, 2 is the sweet spot. Once you get the second one, then the 3rd and 4th are certainly much easier. I do remember that. Okay, 3rd one, 4th one. So now we've got them all in. Boom, and we're seated. So now if you've followed all these steps, kept that little ball in the top center, you have a low-speed adjuster on your performance shock. And that's it. Done.
Sweet.
All right, now that we've unlocked this new adjustment on your bike, we can put it back on and get out to shred with a lot more traction.